Hey guys, welcome back. Let me know if we run into any issues with audio. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. This is going to be a recap for week 16, which was the oil pressure test. Now this test did require a pressure transducer, and it's a little more labor intensive than most of the tests that we did in the past. So, as expected, I didn't get quite as many submissions as previous weeks, so we won't be here for very long. Thank you guys for joining in. This is one that you can't do with the pulse sensor. It'll ruin the pulse sensor. It'll probably cause oil to leak all over the place if you do it with the pulse sensor. So a pressure transducer of some sort is required. In my video, I used the Snap-on, was it the 500 PSI or the 100 PSI? I think it was a 100 PSI transducer, and then the WPS 500 with the picoscope. We'll jump right into the waveforms in the group, and if there's any questions or comments, throw them in there and I'll get to them. I do want to mention that I know there's a couple of you guys out there that don't use Facebook, so you haven't had the opportunity to submit waveforms. I pinned a comment up at the top of the chat, and it's down in the description, and it's on the, I think I put it on the last week's video. I have two new ways for you to submit waveforms. One is through a Google form. You can upload the images there. It'll go to a source where I can access them, and then I'll review them during our recap. And then the other is to email them. I set up a new email just for the Automotive Weekly waveforms, so there's a link to that as well. Either one you wanted to use will get the job done. Or you can post them on Facebook. I'll review all three of them. Hey PJ, what's going on? I did want to mention, I just saw a notification that Bryn Klein and Brendan Steckler are going live in about an hour. Assuming that was correct, PJ may be able to verify that. But I think it's one of their lunchtime webinars from WTI or CTI. Okay, so the first one here is from Paul Smith. He's hoping to post one with the fix, but he doesn't know if it is fixed. He did a valve cover gasket on our 2005 Trailblazer 4.2. Ever since that, it stalls when it's hot. Thought oil pressure may have been a factor, but it's within spec. It says that it should have been 12 psi at 1200 RPM. I have 12 psi idle, so at 1200 RPM should be good. The yellow is crank sensor, green is cam sensor, blue is oil pressure, and red may be hard to see, but it's when it stalls. The computer commands the VVT and it phases 30 degrees. He has more images on the Facebook group Automotive Insight Network. So let's open this one up here, and it looks like we're on the screen, and that's why we can't see the waveform here, which is perfectly okay, because what we're doing is on startup, we have a RPM flare. We see our oil pressure climb, and then as that RPM slowly comes down, it drops and drops and drops. I'm assuming this is probably already warm, since he was testing for a stall when hot. And over here where he has his measurement, we're at 12.53 psi. Now over here on the peak, we are at 60 psi. I do like the 4 independent channels on this one, Paul. Really makes it easy to see. And he is using the 100 psi pressure transducer. I'll probably butcher the name. McCurr? I don't know if that's correct or not. Cam sensor, crank sensor. Now this was more of a diagnostic question, but he did include stuff that we did earlier on, which is cam and crank correlation. And it looks like Hall effect sensors. He was lacking a command to one of the ignition coils. But we'll look at his cam and crank sensor. I don't know if it said what vehicle it was. Yeah, Kia Sedona 3.5 liter. So we see a cam and crank. Now there is some noise on there, but that noise is present on both channels. So it could be a ground issue causing that noise. And then I don't think we have a extra channel showing the amperage of the ignition coils or anything like that. It was just those couple of captures. go down here. We have Doug Wilson. This was from a previous week as well. He had a 2000 Ford Taurus, 3-liter fuel pump failure. Took captures at the relay, found close to 18 amps, and the RPM of the pump was really high. It was at 13,000 RPM, but he had very low pressure while it was running. And then it stalled out and wouldn't start. So he moved to the pump, and he had 13 amps being pulled, but it was only running at 80 RPM. So the pump wasn't hardly turning at all. I replaced the pump and took some captures. Now this does sound like a fuel pump module controls this one, because he said that there is a duty cycle with the new pump. So this is at the relay. We have high amps and high RPM. One of these days I'm just going to have to borrow someone's ATS scope so I can learn how to use it and read it. But this was when it was at high amperage and high RPM. This is when it was a no start, 13 amps and 80 RPM. Cranking, we do have some dropouts. Now, were you able to verify if this was a dropout caused by the fuel pump module letting it go, or if that was actually from the pump? Actually, I don't see Mr. Wilson in here yet. And Paul said the Trailblazer was a cold start. So here we have new pump, 4 amps at 20% duty cycle and 2,500 RPM. So it's always hard to get a capture and be able to look at the commentator bars and everything like that when there's a fuel pump control module, but at least you can verify what's happening when you have a stall condition. Did I still have power going to that fuel pump? Was a computer commanding that fuel pump on full blast and I still didn't have fuel pressure? And then here's a closer look at that fuel pump as it's going through the pulses from that control module. And it's a little blurry, but it says fuel rail pressure 40 psi. Now keep in mind, if you guys are looking at this fuel rail pressure sensor on a Ford, it acts as a gauge pressure, but it's referencing intake vacuum. There's a little vacuum port on it. It has a line going to the intake. So if you put a mechanical gauge on there as well, likely you're going to see like 8 to 10 pounds difference between your mechanical gauge and what the rail pressure shows, unless you unhook that vacuum line from that sensor. Thank you, Doug, for sharing that one. Oh, we just covered yours, Doug. John Webb, 2012 Prius, known good. Specs are very broad and very low. Picture below of the factory specs. Vehicle is in inspection mode. If you're not familiar with the hybrid vehicles from Toyota, they typically shut off on you as soon as you're ready to do some testing. So if you put the vehicle in inspection mode or maintenance mode, it'll continue to run. It'll keep the ICE or internal combustion engine running so you can complete your testing. So he performed the oil pressure test on this one. I did ask him if there was an issue with this one because he was doing it during an inspection. But he only did it because of the homework assignment. So I was just verifying that. And he said that he was also using the Triton D10 as a loaner, but he didn't have any adapters or transducer for it yet. So he ended up using the WPS 500 and a picoscope. The Triton D10 is a very capable unit, very similar to all the other Snap-on units. I will have some videos coming out for that scan tool in the near future. I've seen on Facebook several people posting up that they ended up with some loaner units from their tool guy. So we have tech stream running over here to show our engine speed. We're at 985 RPM, and we're sitting just below 25 psi. So Priuses don't normally idle at a very low RPM, just because they're typically using that engine to power the electric motor as a generator to charge up the battery. So they don't ever drop down to a real low value. At 2,500 RPM, we are between 37 and 50, so that's probably around 40 to 42 psi. And then here's zoomed out, just the difference here. So 54 psi up at the higher RPM, 33 at idle there. And then spec is at idle, we need to have at least 8 pounds. At 2500 RPM, we need to have 21 pounds. Thank you, John, for sharing all that, including the specs. What's funny is I don't see Priuses in the shop very often. And this last week we had 4 of them. I think two of them were getting oil changes. One was a re-inspection for an oil leak, which is coming from the head gasket, and it had a code for the hybrid battery pack. And then we had 2 other ones with the 12-volt battery they required jump starting. The battery was too low to start the vehicle up. And I don't know if it's just because we have a cold snap or what. But currently in Colorado, it's like 7 degrees outside. The Jira has a 2007 Toyota Tundra. Oh, maybe this was the one that was in for inspection. I can't remember. 76,000 miles known good. Used car inspection. Grab a capture. 2,500 RPM. Because service data specified that. This is after an oil change. Started cold and forgot to grab a capture at cold idle. But it was like 75 PSI when it started up. So the specs on the V8 were 10 PSI at idle and 32 PSI at 2,500 RPM. So I probably got that whole story about commenting on the post mixed up between John and Jira's Toyotas. So I was trying to make sure I wasn't missing anything in the comments. U-scope go boom. I actually have a Lexus coming in, RX 400H, with the hybrid light on. Unfortunately, the customer unhooked the battery and cleared the codes, and it started functioning properly again. So I told him he may want to just drive it around until the light comes on again, and then we can inspect it. But if the light doesn't come on, we'll at least take it for a test drive and verify that all the cells in the hybrid battery pack are functioning approximately the same. Okay, so this one, we are at 700 RPM. Pressure was approximately 21 PSI. And it's funny how some of these, the oil pressure is really stable and some of them fluctuate a little bit. I don't know if that's engine RPM fluctuations, but, we see a sink right here on the crankshaft right as that little bump in our oil pressure jumps up. So it's possible that, one rod has a little more clearance in it than the others, or a little less clearance, causing the oil pressure to spike up whenever that piston's on compression or something like that, or the engine speeds up a little bit at this point and the pressure jumps up. Here it's bouncing around a little bit more, but we are around 60 psi, so this may be close to where the pressure relief valve opens up. On a cold engine, even if the pressure relief valve is at 60, you'll still see some higher pressures because the oil's thick and it can't dump enough oil pressure through that pressure relief valve. So 2,600 RPM, 60 PSI of oil pressure, which is well within our required specification. And I think there's one more here. They were just talking about the adapter for the Triton. Mr. Doug Wilson has it right here. So this is a pressure adapter for non-Zeus owners. The Zeus has a special adapter that plugs into the top of the scope unit that powers the pressure transducers. If you're using a Triton or a Modus or using the snap-on pressure transducers with any other scope, you need to supply power to the pressure transducer. So if I remember correctly, this has like a 9-volt battery in the back of it. You can flip it on or off. It has the 2 ports for your 2 transducers, and it has a channel 1 and channel 2 output and then a common ground. So you can use something like this to use those snap-on pressure transducers with any other scanner. And then this is the one specific for the Zeus that plugs into the DB9 connector, and it powers it off of the Zeus. This is also true for the Virus, at least the Virus Edge. the Solus Pro, and I think the original Modus had the DB9 connector on it as well. Daryl will correct me if I'm wrong. This one here, I can't see the measurements on the side here, but he's using the 100 psi probe. Yeah, I can't quite see the measurement there. It says live pressure is 45 psi. Let me go here. Here we go. So we have 50. And what were you checking on this one, Doug? Was this oil pressure? If I would have read the post thoroughly before clicking on it, it probably would have told me. But it looks like that's what we're checking. Okay, here's the oil pressure sender with oil leaking out of it. I remember this one. This is the one that you had to take the bracket off to hook up the probes. And he is using adapters out of this TPT 460M transmission oil pressure gauge set from Mac. Let me close this out. I think he has some additional pictures. Oh, it was a video with some language. 2015 Hyundai Tucson oil light. I thought that there were some pictures posted, but maybe it was just in the video. But he had to take a bracket off that supports the intake manifold in order to get the pressure transducer installed on there. And I think that was it. That's all the ones that we have shared with us. Let me switch screens here while I look up a few things. I did talk to, I actually emailed Foster. They're the ones that make the quick disconnects that we use, or that I use on all of my pressure gauges. And the same gauge or adapter that comes with the WPS 500. And I got the part numbers for the seal kit. You can actually replace the seals, which is a good thing because I would say that half of mine are leaking in some capacity. So you have to buy like a 20, or you can buy a 20 pack to get a better deal. But I couldn't buy them directly from Foster. I had to go through a distributor. Luckily, my local Airgas and Fastenal are both distributors. So I just have to bring the part number to them and they can order it for me. Now, because I didn't really show it that clearly in the video, what adapters I was using. Let me switch back over here. So this is a Foster connector. There's several different versions of this with the same connector. So this is a 2 series Foster connector, and then the rest of the part number, is a variable on what the layout is. So you can have male threads here, female threads here. You can have a quick disconnect here, or you can have the male nipple sticking out. So last time I bought them, I ordered, I believe it was like a 10 pack like this off of eBay, which this says out of stock. You guys can barely see that. But I ordered 10 of each gender and each side of the connector. And I have since run out of them. Some of them have been sacrificial so I could pull the seals out and put them on my connectors. But I'm going to order some more of these just because I use them so often. And plus, I think 2 of my Snap-on pressure transducers need these installed. I think the Snap-on fuel gauge, the new set, uses this style as well, but the gender is like reversed from what the WPS 500 is. So you have to just make a coupler with 2 females or 2 males to adapt it one way or the other. So Dear says, I got a hose made at Napa today for better hookup with the WPS. Yeah, that's where I had mine made. My local Napa store. I think that's who made them. Might have been CarQuest. They both sell Gates hydraulic hoses. I just had 2 hoses made that were, I believe, a 1/4-inch hose with 1/8 inch pipe on each end. One was like 4 foot, the other one 6 foot. I'm still missing the 6 foot one. And that one I actually put a T on the end with quick disconnects on both of them. And hopefully I can find that one, because to get another one made will probably cost me, $50 or $60. Daryl says 1/8 inch Foster Series 2 commonly used in paintball. Now I did see a bunch of similar ones for airsoft and paintball for the CO2 supplies. And those are probably more commonly available than the industrial ones, just because there's so much more people buying stuff for airsoft and paintball, especially teenagers that are going to buy all the accessories, remote mount CO2 tanks. They do make some 2 and 3 foot whip hoses they're probably 1/8 inch inside diameter, which typically that's all you don't have fluid flowing through it. Normally you're just checking pressure, so that would work just fine as long as the burst rate of that hose is high enough, which if it's running CO2 then it's normally rated at like 1,000 psi or something like that, so you should be good. Thanks everyone for the captures. Just a reminder, if those of you that joined in late, I put 2 new methods of submitting waveforms in the pinned comment and in the description of this video. One is a Google form. The other is a new email address I made just for submitting the waveforms. I will include those when we do the review as well as the Facebook videos. And then I don't think PJ got back to me if there was a class tonight. If you guys want to stick around, I will check real quick. I believe so. Let me show you guys this. They posted it in several of the automotive groups on Facebook. I'll have to move that over there. So this is a CTI Lunch and Learn webinar, but they just posted it, so I'm guessing that it's coming up here shortly. In 1 hour, it says. Topics, they're covering engine mechanical faults using the lab scope and pressure transducers, and it's a free class. Oh, so it's not happening in an hour? Okay. When is it happening? I'll click on it and I will let you guys know. I just saw the post and assumed that it was happening right away. I lied. It is Monday at lunchtime Eastern. So as long as you guys are on the East Coast, you can do that on your lunch break. I was kind of excited. I thought that we were going to get to watch this tonight. And it wasn't really going to be a lunchtime, it was going to be a dinner time deal. So I apologize for getting your hopes up. Thanks for clarifying that, PJ. George, it's not going to be on a YouTube channel. It's going to be on the CTI. It's going to be a Zoom meeting with CTI. So let me see if I can find that for you, or share the link. Give me 1 second. Let's find out where I can post this. So I don't know if you... that link's too long for me to even post on here. If you go to the CTI website and go to their virtual training, there should be a link to some of the free lunchtime classes. During the initial part of COVID, CTI started doing all their free webinars. They were normally like a 2-hour class, and then they switched in August back to the paid version. But they just recently announced that they're going to come out with lunchtime classes, and those are going to be free. But if you're not on the East Coast, then it's going to be, it might be on a different time zone, depending on who's presenting the class, because they have instructors all over the country. So I appreciate you guys coming out. I don't have a video filmed for tomorrow. We've been super busy. I got, you can barely see it, but I got paint on my hands, remodeling a bedroom. We're not done yet, so I haven't even been at the shop to film a video this weekend. So we'll probably skip this week. If there's a bunch of submissions or anything weird, then I'll do a live stream next week, but probably hold off for a couple of weeks until I get a new video up. I appreciate you guys all for coming out here, and I will see you next time. Yeah, YouTube only allows 200 characters. That's what I saw, 561 characters long. But I think still you'd probably have to be a Facebook user to follow that link. So thanks for coming out, and I'll see you guys next time.